Jarrett, you're exactly right. A year ago, it was just unthinkable to have the US government or president talking about crypto and buying wrapped Bitcoin and Ethereum and a Trump token. But the world has changed fundamentally. And I think that's going to be the next step of evolution here is it's no longer an individual, a company level. It's now countries, nation states that are vying for this Bitcoin supply.
Welcome back to the Compass Mining Podcast. My name is Jarrett, and today I'm here with the gentleman from the Power Mining Analysis, Bryce McNallie, Anthony Power. Great to have you guys back in the pod. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Having a very good day in the markets. Bitcoin and the miners are up today, Jarrett.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's been a great week,
Anthony,
Jarrett. Great news all week. It's been very positive. Great to be here.
It's honestly, since you guys are also in the media game and constantly sharing stuff on your X accounts, and I'm going to share both of your X accounts and the Power Mining Analysis link in the episode description. It's been the last 72 hours has felt like a marathon. I feel like I have bags under my eyes because last night I wasn't sleeping because at 11 p.m. I'm still sitting there on Twitter for Compass, pushing stuff out because it feels like with the executive orders and everything else, it's just it's a very bullish time. I actually want to start there and get both of your opinions and feedback on the executive order. I assume you've read it. If you haven't read it, that's fine. It's okay. I think it's more directional than it is, but Anthony, were you able to read it? And what were some thoughts there?
I didn't read the whole order. I mean, obviously, I like everybody else. I saw the news. I listened to President Trump announce it. He made those two clear announcements yesterday about AI and about crypto. America wanting to lead in both those areas. I mean, bear in mind, we've been covering this story for the last few months now, and with the likes of Dennis Porter and Satoshi Action Fund rejuvenating all the states and getting them to sign up. I think there's 11 states sort of got this process going at their level, never mind at Congress level. So this was really this news is really, I mean, I didn't expect to come out this week, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you just literally have the inauguration, and to me, there's probably a few more important things that need to be signed off rather than rush into crypto. But day 3, he's signing orders for crypto. It was great news. Obviously, we've seen a massive run in the Bitcoin price since the results of the election. The Bitcoin price is up about 50% since then. So I'm expecting it probably to rally further. But bear in mind, we've had a great rally since November.
Well, and I was going to say, it really goes back in my mind, and we covered this on our channel, Anthony, to the crypto ball. So last Friday, we saw the launch of the Trump coin. That really gave us an inkling that the Trump family is all in on crypto. Then on Monday, obviously, we wanted to hear the big Ross Ulbricht announcement. That didn't come on day 1. People were concerned, is Trump going to hold true on his promises or not? That came on the second day. Then obviously Senator Loomis was appointed as committee chair. Then we had the executive order, and I did have a chance to go through it, Jared. And what was really nice in there, there's some strong language around the CBDCs or central backed digital CBDCs. And I think that was really encouraging as well. Not only are we getting some positive momentum on the crypto, on the Bitcoin front, but we're also getting some reassurance that the government isn't going to overstep their reach and get involved with maybe some of those centralized controlled tokens or coins.
Yeah, the executive order just reads, it's insane to read. It outlines even definitions like what's blockchain, what's a ledger, and just even see that on the whitehouse.gov website is insane, because when I hopped into this circus and fun time we call Bitcoin back in 2017, it was so far away from that would have never have been a thing. Even though Trump was in office at the point when I got in, it was just never a thing. It was too far away. And in the last 6 to 7 months, since honestly Nashville, when I was able to meet you guys, things have just really taken off. And I guess the only worry I say is I don't want Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and crypto or any of the industry, the blockchain-backed industry, digital assets, whatever word you want to use to say it. But especially with Bitcoin mining, I don't want it to be politicized. I see it as a technology, and I don't think we should ever politicize technology. If we had politicized the internet, that wouldn't have gone well. It wouldn't have gone well for the U.S. So the question I have, since Bryce, you are a neighbor to the north, and Anthony, you are across the pond, when are you guys coming to the U.S.? When are you just making the move? Because it feels like that's going to be the home of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, right?
Well, I might
Well,
not
we are
even need to
making moves.
move because it sounds like Trump's going to take Canada over as the 51st state. So I don't even
Okay.
know if I'll need to move. I might just be American soon enough here. But there is so much positive momentum. Anthony and I have talked a lot this year about the business, power mining analysis, looking at different jurisdictions for tax shelters and havens and stuff like that. But it seems now Trump wants the US to be the crypto capital. I know he's promised some very aggressive commitments to AI, data center infrastructure, to taxes, to trying to bring a lot of the crypto companies within their borders. So I don't know when I'm coming down to the States, but it's definitely becoming more and more of an alternative for both of us.
I, on the other hand, do know when Bryce is coming down to the States because on the 22nd of February, we're flying into New York for a conference then. And then we've got Mining Disrupt in March, and we've got the Bitcoin conference in May in Las Vegas. So we've got at least 3 trips planned in the next 6 months. So we are making efforts to get over there. Yeah, no, it's interesting that the whole space at the moment, and you've picked up all the great points. There's so many good points. Yesterday's roller coaster. I was actually in a Spaces session just as market opened, and it started to feed through in that space. I think there was 12,000 people in the Spaces meeting. So it was Mario Nafal was one of his Spaces meetings, which gets obviously a lot of interest. It's always the latest news. Gary Cardone was on there. Scott Melker, there was Ranur, there was a whole host of big names in crypto talking about this news just leaking through, saying the order was about to be signed at 10 o'clock when actually it was the order to determine who the chair of the committee was going to be. And so people had jumped the gun a little bit. But however, even in that conversation, even when they found out and we saw the Bitcoin price rally, then we saw the Bitcoin price pull back, people on that channel were still saying, "Hey, don't think this is this is great news. Her becoming the chair of that committee, Digital Assets Committee, is extremely positive, extremely powerful position. She can coordinate meetings and get things in place." And so there was a lot of positivity then. And then literally, like you say, a couple of hours later, we're getting the president signing and talking to effectively to the world, saying, "We want to lead in crypto," and he did the same for AI and HPC as well. So it's been a really good week. I've enjoyed it. I mean, we cover the mining stocks, and the mining stocks have rallied a bit today. We've seen some green lights today on the mining stocks, which is good. And we were talking about the show. We're seeing so many comments at the moment on the videos saying, "Oh, when they're going to move?" That they seem to be stale at the moment. And we spoke about this yesterday. You've got to remember, there are so many things happening at the moment. Not just mining. You've got high performance computing. You've got the chip manufacturers. You've got the quantum computing stocks coming into play, and there isn't like billions of dollars just sat around in people's accounts not doing anything. A lot of this money's been put to work in various asset classes, and what we're seeing is a movement of that money around the asset classes. So if you're seeing quantum stocks increase in value, it's because money's been moved from another asset class to feed that, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. The mining stocks have probably not had as much hype as they did in 2021 or early 2021, when literally every day I was waking up in 2020. In the first 3 months, it was like another 10%, another 10%. And it was just relentless. I mean, it was like you were making money hand over fist in that early period of 2021. And it obviously all came crashing down. But in that first 3 months, it was great. We're not seeing that now. Maybe it's a little bit more stable, even though we're in a volatile market. But believe you me, there's not just billions of dollars sitting around waiting to be invested. People have invested. Look at the ETFs. I mean, we talked about the ETF funds over the last 12 months. It's getting to the stage now. Actually, I was saying to Bryce, it's starting to scare me a little bit that you have BlackRock owning nearly 3% of every Bitcoin that is ever going to be produced, and the same with MicroStrategy. So between them, between 5 and 6% of every Bitcoin is held by 2 financial organizations. Now, I thought this was a decentralized asset class, so everyone have a piece of it. But when you've got 5%, 6%, that's a whole. You'd expect if the US said we had 5%, that makes sense because the US is the biggest economy in the world, so that would make sense. But when you've got companies that have literally nearly 3% of every Bitcoin that's going to be produced, and he's going after more of it. It's sort of like it scares me a little bit. Is this what was expected? Did we expect to see that amount of buying from one company in the market? So people say it's a real positive thing. I just don't. I'm very positive. Not sold any Bitcoin, but I just that's one of the sort of like the factors I look at. Is that an issue? But the ETFs, the 11 ETF funds that were signed off in January last year, they have just been relentlessly buying 10, 15, 20 times the amount of production in terms of buying. We can't produce as much Bitcoin as they want. So at some point, Jarrett, you're going to have to sell your Bitcoin because these ETFs are coming after it. Bryce was already thinking about selling his. I've not sold any of mine.
I'm pretty sure Bryce sold at 99. So Bryce sold at 99, Anthony. He's out.
I'm out of here, boys.
He's done.
But no, you're exactly right, Anthony. And it is scary thinking about that. Realistically, if a couple dozen more companies got that same idea, that would be the entire global supply of Bitcoin. But where I do think the game changes here, just as we saw the ETFs last year, now we're going to get those nation states buying. And Jarrett, you're exactly right. A year ago, it was just unthinkable to have the US government or president talking about crypto and buying wrapped Bitcoin and Ethereum and a Trump token. But the world has changed fundamentally. And I think that's going to be the next step of evolution here. Is it's no longer an individual, a company level. It's now countries, nation states that are vying for this Bitcoin supply.
Just let me add 20 seconds to that. So if you look at forget the ETFs, look at the public companies. If you look at the table that Huddle 15 produces on a regular basis, I think it's got 60 or even 100 companies. MicroStrategy has about 75% of all the Bitcoin on that table. So the other 59 or 99, I think 60 companies in total, or maybe 99 totals, they've got the remaining 25% of that total 600,000 of Bitcoin that the public companies hold at the moment. That's what I'm trying to say. Number one company's got 461,000 Bitcoin. The number two company has 45,000 Bitcoin, Marathon Digital. And they haven't even got 10% of what MicroStrategy have got. That's the number two company. So this is a bit like the dominance in fact, it's like a bit like the Bitcoin, Ethereum, crypto dominance.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's now 55% dominant of all crypto, and Ethereum's about 11%. So 66% of all crypto is two coins, which is why I don't tend to look at anything other than those two, and predominantly it's Bitcoin. MicroStrategy are getting themselves into that position where they're just going to be the dominant player in Bitcoin as well, because they're going to have such a hodl. Great for Michael Saylor, but I just don't know if there's an overplay on dominance. That's my point. I don't know how to word it correctly.
No, there's, Bitcoin, at least from my opinion, the philosophy was you wanted to decentralize who controlled it and who created it. That was the most important thing to come out. And I'm actually reading a book right now, and it's like, oh my God, I can't even remember the name of the book, but it's about Bitcoin's origins, and it's been a great read. And I will be sure to, if it comes to me before the episode's over, I'll share it. But it was talking about how, when Bitcoin was created, we were like, okay, we have to get away from the government printing. So how do we create something that no one owns, but everyone controls, and that lives in cyberspace? And now it sounds easy because we have Bitcoin, and there's an example we can point to. But before that, there was 20 years of people trying to solve the Byzantine general's problem and solve all these things. So we needed something that could create Bitcoin that wasn't centralized, and that wasn't controlled by any one person. So it's not really a decentralization issue. It's almost like we're having an inequality issue as far as who owns Bitcoin. But I don't know if it's I say issue. I don't know necessarily if it's a problem, because if you think about gold, I'm sure that gold is probably only owned by the three biggest G7 countries, and the average person really doesn't have any. And I'm not saying that this is the Bitcoin is gold narrative, but it kind of is just on the same thing. Like, how much gold does the three of us have? probably the same relative amount that any random person in the world has of Bitcoin compared to MicroStrategy, if MicroStrategy is the Fort Knox in this analogy. So exactly. So I don't,
Zero.
anyways, it's interesting to think, but some of the other narratives, and I kind of want to get into narratives. So thank you, Anthony, for like pushing us there. But this idea of centralization versus decentralization, we talked about block template centralization, that being an issue. We've talked, I think generally too, you don't want too much hash necessarily focused in one part of the world or not. That could be an issue. Obviously, maybe that's not an issue though, because there used to be so much hash that was in China. It went offline. The US absorbed it, and the network, no one who was exchanging Bitcoin was none the wiser. So as far as that goes, you guys talk to CEOs from the PubCos all the time, like every single day you guys are talking about that. Is this a narrative that you hear CEOs talk about from the PubCos? Does this come up, this idea of centralization versus decentralization and that kind of battle?
No, we haven't sort of raised this question, and even just thinking about it as we're talking it through now. I mean, I suppose the counter argument is MicroStrategy has, tens of millions of shareholders.
Exactly.
And so therefore they own the Bitcoin effectively. You could argue the shareholders own the Bitcoin.
Same with BlackRock.
That
right?
would be that would be a way to soften that idea that it's not one person, it's tens of millions of people who have shares in that company, own it. And believe you me, a lot of people from the mining space went into MicroStrategy last year, and that share price, when it took off, I mean, no mining stock increased in value like MicroStrategy last year. That playing Bitcoin. So maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit. It just sort of, when we sit and look at the percentages and we say them two have got nearly 6% of everything that's going to be, it just sounds a big number. And if Bitcoin gets to 100 billion valuation and they're up to like close to 10% of it, it's like it's going to be 100 trillion valuation. It's going to be significant amount of that. The largest company in the world is 3 trillion.
What I was going to add
up now. Sorry?
No, it's a good point, Anthony. And BlackRock, I guess you could say the same thing, right? It's
same thing, yeah. It's not BlackRock, it's the investors. Yeah.
But one thing we have identified on the channel with the CEOs, Jarrett, is the concentration of mining that goes on not only in the United States, but in West Texas. And that is a concern of mine. If there were ever to be a natural disaster, a tornado, whatever the case is, power outage, I think that could have a big impact, not only on the production, but just how the Bitcoin mining environment looks and feels until that problem was resolved. So that's definitely one we've started to notice, and even more so now with the incoming Trump administration, all the tax benefits and policy changes. It seems like all of the big miners in the world are looking in West Texas right now.
Yeah, nearly 3 gigawatts of the power in Texas at the peak last year was utilized on Bitcoin mining. So they have something like peak load in Texas during the summer of last year was about 86 gigawatts. And at that point in time, about just under 3 gigawatts was actually Bitcoin mining. And obviously that the Bitcoin miners can curtail, instantly as required, and they do for the ERCOT systems that them in place down there. But that's more Bitcoin mining in Texas than probably all the other states in America added together.
I think so, and I think that word was the word I think I was trying to think of, was concentration as opposed to centralization. Those are completely different ideas and shouldn't be conflated. Anthony, obviously I was being hyperbolic about you coming and moving to the United States, even though that would be nice and you were always welcome. The thing I read this today on Twitter, that Andreessen Horowitz had shut down their UK office, their Web3 office or something, and they're moving those people stateside because they're like, oh, the US is finally giving, they're basically put the bat signal and they said, here, come, now's the time. For you, as someone who's over in the UK, do people, and this is just curiosity, right? We're getting a little bit away from mining, but do people just think you're crazy because you're basically following this nascent growing industry that, as you said, is basically hyper concentrated in West Texas, is really an Americana idea, the idea of turning energy into a monetary network. I assume the story in my head is you're down the street getting your English breakfast and someone's like, Anthony, what do you do? And you start to talk and they just their head explodes.
Yeah, a little bit of that. I mean, I go to a gym close by, and I talk to them, and some of them actually have actually bought Bitcoin since I've been chatting to them over the last 18 months or something So, but I mean, you go back. I mean, the UK, we invented the World Wide Web, right? We invented HTML, we invented DNA. There's so much that we're ahead of in technology terms, we're ahead of the game. But with Bitcoin, we are behind the curve. We have a Bitcoin policy unit here that tries the best to educate people, but the government, the banks, on some banks in the UK won't even let you transfer your funds to an exchange to buy Bitcoin. That's how bad it is. They literally control it. They say, no, we can't let you send it to Coinbase to buy Bitcoin. So you have to change banks, and looking at what's happening in the US, part of me feels like maybe that is the place to live. I mean, I have thought about moving away from the UK, but the US wasn't in sort of like my top 5 destinations. Not because of any reason, but I was trying to think of, places like Dubai, which are very much very focused around crypto. You could argue Dubai is like the capital, for where the crypto space are together. So a lot of people move there, and a lot of it will be down to tax efficient reasons for going there. Also, there are other places around the world. I mean, some places in South America as well. I mean, quite a lot of people have moved to Costa Rica, to El Salvador since they started using Bitcoin as their reserve currency there. And also the tax benefits of being down there. I was fortunate to be on a plane with Max and Stacey Kaiser, going to Nashville. So I got to chat with Max for about 3 or 4 hours, and he's been in El Salvador for quite a few years now, and they help down there. They do a lot of education down there, a lot of advisory to the government down there. So, he was explaining to me, all that. And he's been in the space. I mean, you go back through the videos, he's probably one of the OGs in the space in terms of he was orange pill before pretty much everybody else. And he's been consistent. He puts that message out very, very regularly on social media. So if you're ever feeling down and you want to be perked up, put a Max Kaiser or a Michael Saylor video on, and you sort of like rejuvenate yourself in about 15 minutes. Because in different ways, they both come out with a sort of like a similar fix for you, if that's the right terminology.
You know how as content creators or people creating content on the internet here, sometimes you have to say not financial advice. I'm going to say that's not therapy advice to listen to Max and Michael if you're feeling down. That just may not be for everyone. Yeah, Anthony, I'm currently in Colombia. If you do decide to leave the UK, come on down here. You'd be closer in a time zone for Bryce for recording. It's really close to the States. You can get up to Mining Disrupt in 2.5 hour flight. You can go see Max, maybe another 2.5 hour flight if you go west. And if you need to go to Texas to see your facilities, that's about a 4-hour flight. So it's a little bit closer. Let's dive into the PubCos. We normally don't talk about PubCos as much on this channel, on the Compass Mining podcast. We're focused on other narratives in the space. We just mentioned a little bit about decentralization versus centralization. Let's talk about the PubCos. Anthony, you put out an article through Compass once a month that goes through normally 14 to 16 or 15 companies.
15
and
companies, yeah.
Yeah, and I do my best to review it. You're a great writer. It's easy. When I look at that, all I see month over month is growth. It's leveraging money to grow. It's M&As. It's ATM. It's all of these things that are allowing stuff to grow. I mean, at some point you can't grow forever, right? It's not like, I guess, the beanstalk that goes up into the stratosphere, but it feels like that. What are you guys, when you guys looking ahead into 2025, what are the things that you're kind of looking for as far as like, what's the word I'm looking for when you're out hiking and you're like, oh, landmarks. What are some landmarks that you guys are looking for as you get into 2025 for PubCos? Is this could be aligned to the stock value. This could be aligned to we haven't seen a PubCo turn on a nuclear power plant. This could be aligned to, we've seen a PubCo completely actually even leave Bitcoin and go into AI and just HPC, or we've seen some AI and HPC they've stopped that because Bitcoin price went where no one thought it would go. So now we're going back to Bitcoin. What are some of the landmarks, I guess I'm calling them, on our journey, if I'm creating like an analogy here? But what are you guys looking for? And Bryce, if you could kick it off for 2025, what are things that are on the horizon?
Yeah, it's been interesting. This is kind of my second cycle in here. So obviously Bitcoin cycles 4 years. And now that we have a pretty good understanding of the miners, you've seen some very evident trends. When are they building? When are they buying rigs? When are they scaling? Last year, kind of the tail of the tape was a lot of ATM use, and people were really trying to get their exahash up. I remember Anthony and I made fun at the start of the year. Every time they put a reserve option order on some S21 Pros, they would put out a press release, or every time they had a new exahash target. I remember when Iron increased theirs, just phenomenal press releases. Now we've really seen that change towards HPC AI, the convertible bonds. There's a real difference in strategy. So to your point, Jarrett, they're still growing, but they're using different levers. One thing we've heard in terms of 2025 landmarks, it sounds like this is the year where we're really going to see a lot of these big hyperscaler HPC AI contracts signed, even more so now with the Stargate project and all the investment from Trump. So this year for me, I think we're going to start to see, and we already have with Riot, for example, people starting to pull back on the exahash goals, people understanding, hey, if I don't have my Bitcoin mine built by now, we're in the bull market now. This is as best as it's going to get for 4 years for Bitcoin. If I'm not ready to hit the ground running right now, maybe I start to think about allocating some of those megawatts towards HPC AI and start to build my business resilience for the next bear cycle here. So I think the growth mode was last year. People now understand this is the time to make money in Bitcoin mining, start preparing for that next part of the cycle. So that in terms of milestones, that's what I would expect here, Jarrett, is a couple big blockbuster HPC AI contracts with hyperscalers in the first part of 2025. Bitcoin, we think, could get anywhere in the $150,000 to $250,000 range. We've heard from multiple CEOs, the 130,000 US milestone is kind of the inflection point between HPC AI profits and Bitcoin. So I think that's going to be another critical kind of landmark, to use your analogy, to watch for. As we get closer to that 130K, these businesses are going to kind of need to make a decision one way or another, because we're going to start to see that profit curve invert there.
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary services. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success.
Yeah, from my perspective, 2 of the biggest stories from 2024, which I'm looking forward to seeing in 2025. The biggest story of last year was obviously the Core Scientific deal with CoreWeave. No one could really touch that. There are other miners who've got HPC deals, but nowhere near the size of that deal. 500 megawatts, 8.7 billion in revenues over the next 12 or 13 years. That kicks off in 2025. So, they're already refurbishing sites. We went down to Denton in June last year. That site's been flattened. That was a 150 megawatt facility there at Denton, their flagship Bitcoin mining facility. And so I'm looking forward to seeing those revenues come through. And I'm looking forward to the market giving them credibility for that contract, because I don't see it fully in their valuation yet. I've spoke to some of the Wall Street analysts, the big analysts, from the investment banks, and even using the most prudent of ratios, they're nowhere near the valuation he should be. For me, one of the second biggest stories last year was actually BitDeer, with the announcement they're going to start building their own seal miner. I just thought, it was a great storyline. Not many people, when we started covering BitDeer, not many people had heard about BitDeer. They had one analyst from the US looking at them. Now they've got 11 or 12 analysts fully focused on BitDeer. And if you look at their percentage in some of the big funds around the US, their percentage is really high, because people believe they've got a big play in this space. They've got a massive pipeline of power, and not a pipeline of power that is like fields undeveloped. They are developing so much megawatts as we speak that will come online this year. they've already got one of the biggest sites in the world at Rockdale, next door to Riot Platforms. They've got a 500 megawatt facility there, which is going to grow further. They've got Ohio, they've got Bhutan, they've got big facilities in Norway coming online. So a lot's going to happen this year. But then they've got this Seal miner coming online as well, which apparently at the moment I'm hearing is going to, with all the positives, their fleet efficiency at the moment isn't great. They've got probably, of the miners that we cover, them and Hut have probably got the least efficient fleet because they haven't really spent any capital in recent years bringing it up to date. So they're using older miners. They're paying reasonably cheap energy, so you can get away with that. But once these new A2 miners come into play, and I think some of the signs are that they're going to get sub 15 joules a terahash out of these if they're at the right settings. That puts them on a par with S21s. And then you have all the big playing miners. So the likes of the Clean Sparks, the Marathon Digitals, the Riots, Iron have come into this group, very, very quickly. I started looking at Iron 3 years ago. They were half an exahash. Can we join your analysis? Yeah, just make sure you get the data to me on a monthly basis, and you can be in the tables. And now 31 exahash going to 50 exahash by June. That's a massive increase. They had a 455% increase in hash rate during 2024. So percentage terms, the highest. CleanSpark had more in terms of actual hash rate going up. So they've been growing really nicely. And by buying these latest machines, Iron's fleet efficiency is 15 joules. That effectively means they've pretty much got S21, T21s all the way through their fleet, because S19s just wouldn't get that efficiency. They got rid of all the S19s. They're now on the most efficient machines there. And in Texas, they've been getting less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which means it's a double win-win for Iron, because they can get cheap power, efficient miners. And the article that Compass published this week on my behalf showed that they're achieving, at the moment, based on December's power rates, around about 80% margins on mining. So margins is the total revenue less the energy cost. 80%. Now, we've had a halving last year. I go back to 2021, and there were a few miners then, obviously it's 2021, that were getting 80% margins. Hive Digital, Argo Blockchain used to be a bigger miner than they are nowadays. They were getting 80%. To say after a halving that some of these miners can still achieve an 8% margin is unbelievable, and yet they are doing. So, I think I wrote 1 or 2 articles for Compass on that actual issue of what a miner is going to have to do before the halving to get ready for the halving. And we talked about 3 things: get the most efficient miners, get the cheapest energy, and make sure you've got cash there to cover you through that shortfall when the halving occurs and the Bitcoin price doesn't rally as quickly as everyone expects it to. And that's exactly what happened. The Bitcoin price did not rally post the halving. It stayed in that sort of like all the way up to the election, I think, in that band of about $50 to $60,000. And in terms of hash price, was probably averaging about $40 to $45 a petahash per day, which is, when you think of pre-halving, it was $100 to $110 per day. And if you think of 2021, it was $400 a day they were earning miners. So, all that revenue coming down, but now we're seeing miners get real efficient and also find that cheap power. And there's about 3 or 4 miners that were getting over 7% margins as well. So Iron weren't the only ones that were excelling. If you look at Core Scientific, they've got a power cost of about 2.5 cents. Cypher Mining 2.7. Even Hut 8 have an energy cost of about 3 cents. And yes, they've not got an efficient fleet at the moment, but that power cost does give them a really good margin as well.
I thank you for both sharing, and I'm excited to see how this plays out. And we'll find out very shortly, because this year, in crypto years, bull markets fly by, bear markets take forever. We had posted on the 1st to kick off the year poll, and maybe you guys weighed in, maybe you didn't, but we were talking about where we think the exahash is going to be on January 1st, 2026. So I'd like to get your predictions. Now, in the past, you guys have said you don't do Bitcoin price predictions. I totally understand that, but I'm hoping you'll indulge and give me your overall exahash predictions by January 1st, 2026. And I'll give you the 4 options, and then you can, and then I'll tell you one of them won outright very much, but we had 979 exahash, 1150, 1198, and then 1300. So Bryce, what do you think?
I was going to guess 1200 before.
Okay, so 1198.
Probably, yeah.
Anthony?
I mean, I would say I would expect it to get to around 1,000. I'm
around
not sure.
1,000.
12, yeah, I think 1,000. I think looking at the hash increases this year, and bear in mind, we've just seen Riot this week turn around and say we're not going to grow our Bitcoin mining hash rate this year. Instead of, I think it was 47 exahash, they're going to get to 37 or 38 exahash. They're going to focus that 600 megawatts at Corsicana on HPC. And believe you me, if you're going to mention you're not growing hash rate in 2025, you bet your bottom dollar that they've got something, or they've already done some sort of an assessment there. That, they've had these companies come in and start looking at the options, but you don't come out with a statement like that unless you've got some sort of like real options that HPC can be available at that site, as well as the Bitcoin mining that they do there as well. So I think they're aggressively looking at HPC, which might mean the likes of Marathon and other miners. So, TerraWolf, they said they're not going to look at any more increase in, other than what they've got planned already, which I think gets to 13 exahash in the first quarter of 2025. And we've got Patrick on the podcast Money, so we'll get clarification on that. But the last two podcasts, we're not growing hash rate, we're growing HPC. So a lot of the miners are now switching their strategy. Hut 8, I mean, everyone but Hut 8 have announced the HPC deal. Even the local parish where the site is, they've even turned around and said, yeah, they've got the vote, it went through, and the size of the contract, blah, blah, blah. How big the site's going to be, but Hut 8 haven't said anything yet, so I'm not sure. But it looks like they're going to be fully focused on driving that, because that's an enormous contract. I think it's $12 billion. So that puts it in the sort of the core scientific deal type scenario. So also you've got to think, growing hash rate. So who's going to grow? 50, you're saying 1,200, 50% more than where we are at the moment. The 7-day moving average at the moment is about 780, 790. So, to grow another 400, that's 50% more hash rate than we have at the moment. So I'm just trying to work out in my head. Bear in mind, 40% of all hash rate is in the US. Where's that going to grow? Where's that going to grow to 60%? Or sorry, remain at 40%, but keep growing to get to 1,200. I think 1,000 is probably more realistic. But then again, every year we've asked these questions, and every year most people get it wrong. I mean, we did the same, I think, a year ago. We asked Ben Gagnon, and by the end of January, we'd reached his target. So we asked him in early January. By the end of the month, he'd already got his annual target. He was already... So I'm happy to say 1,000, because I think in terms of, we've had a great 2024, and 2025 will be great as well, but I don't think we'll see the growth because miners are looking at HPC.
Now my rebuttal to that would be companies like Kango. So we've seen new players come in, just absolutely set up massive operations. And again, back to my point about the governments, nation states, I could easily see, if Trump starts this strategic Bitcoin reserve up, China, Russia, one of those type of countries turns on 100 exahash as a national mining initiative, something like that. So I agree with you, Anthony. I don't know if we'll see it at a company level wide growth, but I could see some nation states getting pretty heavily involved with this.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, China had 50% of all mining before they banned it. So if China reversed that order, and bear in mind, where are Bitmain? They are China. So why wouldn't that sort of growth increase? And we know that, I think we know that there is mining going ahead in China anyway. I think people can, they know where the mining's taking place, not necessarily the building, but they know from country by country what the level of Bitcoin mining there is. And, there's an expectation that there's still mining going ahead there. But if they reversed the order and legalized it, we'd see an influx of mining machines, because one thing about the Chinese, that nothing, you talk about Las Vegas as being, a gambling capital city. Las Vegas has got absolutely nothing on Macau. Macau is 5 times bigger than Vegas in terms of money going through there, and that's Chinese money. They like a flutter, the Chinese, and so Bitcoin mining, making money. That's a flutter. That's a legalized flutter. You can't go. There's no betting shops in China. They've got to go off country. They've got to go to Macau, which is a Portuguese state, and they get a little ferry from Hong Kong. It takes half an hour. And there are about 8 or 9 big casinos there. But I was there a couple of years ago. It takes 5 times the amount of revenue Vegas takes in gambling terms, and it's just unrealistic. It's the most populated country in the world, Macau. You could probably fit it in Central Park, and there's like 600,000 people live there.
Anthony, what I wanted to say to you was that your 1,000 is right in line with our chief mining officer. Because Shannon Squires was the one who said 979. Yeah. And he said basically 2 things. One, there's not enough energy infrastructure to be able to support that. It just doesn't, it's too hard to source it. And, the logistic. The other thing he said was people go into HPC and AI. And so you're not going to see as much exahash. But we're going to see. I want to share with you the results, though. 979 got 10%. 1150 got 21%. 1198, which is close to Bryce's 1200, got 22%. And if you've been doing the math in your head, that means 47% went to 1300. So there are some serious mining bulls who, are hoping to see the exahash absolutely explode this year, but we will see. Bryce, if we could, I want to go back on something that you had mentioned when I asked you about some narratives, and you were talking about the Stargate initiative that is, from what I understand, is kind of like, let's get some of the biggest names in AI, let's put some money into them and let them do their thing. Or can you break me down the Stargate and then also hypothesize a little bit? Do you think that the White House or the new administration could create a similar initiative for Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, so basically, if you watch the inauguration, it was interesting, and Anthony and I talked about this. It wasn't Trump's family in the front row or any politicians. It was all the billionaire tech company CEOs. And Trump is a businessman first, politician second. He knows how to build businesses, companies, get through red tape, regulation. So I think his strategy here is under his golden era banner. He knows AI is the next frontier. He knows they have a bunch of big companies with tech resources in the States, and he knows that they've been held back with red tape in terms of getting the power infrastructure online and developing these sites. So I think what he's basically doing there, Jarrett, is saying, okay, we're going to get the gloves off, all the red tape out of your way, put in some money, some substantial money here. I think it's 100 billion, and then it goes up to 500 billion at some point. And I've actually already seen tweets from Mark Zuckerberg. They're talking about building a 2 gigawatt data center, almost the size of Manhattan. And he committed to having a gigawatt of that online this year. So I think what this is a grandiose statement saying we need to put our foot on the pedal here, and we're going to do that in a big way. In terms of Bitcoin mining, I think they're virtually interchangeable. The more money, attention, power, infrastructure that comes into the United States, that benefits all companies in this type of, whether you're quantum, whether you're Bitcoin mining, HPC, AI. More power is going to mean cheaper power rates, and more AI innovation is going to mean more human capital, more experts, more knowledge, more data center construction. I think it's one of the situations a rising tide lifts all ships.
Anthony, anything to add on there? Just the idea of, because basically when I saw Stargate, I was like, oh, I don't see a way in which Amanda Fabiano isn't, up next to Trump and they're announcing their initiative. I don't have the cool name like Stargate, but they're announcing their initiative to get the right people in the room for Bitcoin mining and say, here is a lump sum of money. Let's advance this technology. Let's advance this industry. Let's make sure America is leading in this industry that is Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult that from a market perspective, the market, the investment banks, we spoke to the analysts, they're still saying Bitcoin mining's not a business, and they're focused more on
what's their logic there, Anthony?
They ran the numbers. And actually, if you took a step back and looked at maybe the last, say, 8 quarters, Any of the successful miners have probably been green 2 of those, or maybe 3 of the last 8 quarters. The argument will be as well, we're in new technology, it's new growth, but if you're losing money in 5 quarters out of 8, that's not great. I think 2025, the start of it now, if the Bitcoin price remains like this is and grows from here, this is going to be a nice period. This course that we'll see for the last 3 months of last year will be great for miners. But the Wall Street guys, if you say HPC, they're all over it. We noticed that we went to Core Scientific's Investor Day, and the coach was full from Dallas to Denton. Every seat was taken. And then the following day, we did the same trip with the same people to Corsicana to see the largest Bitcoin mining site in the world. Coach was half empty. And I said to him, where's the rest of the guys? He goes, we're not here for Bitcoin mining. It's like, we're here for HPC. And, the first question to Jason that day at the Q&A session, are you looking at HPC? And he went, no, and there'll be no more questions about HPC. And that was it. He said, we want to be we want to be the biggest miner. We just toured a fantastic facility. I'm not going to, we were in awe of it. I went on a Spaces meeting that day and I spoke for 20 minutes about the trip. Just as soon as we got back to the hotel, there was a Spaces meeting and I went on, I said, look, can I speak? And I spoke for 20 minutes about the trip to Corsicana. It's fantastic. But I also said, he's not looking at HPC. They're looking at Bitcoin mining. And now, 6 months later, we in the last few podcasts with Jason, he's warmed to HPC. He's, even Zach Bradford from CleanSpark, who are adamant they'll never go into HPC. If CoreWeave went to them with a deal tomorrow, he'd bite their hand off. Every miner wants that deal. TeraWulf talk about their deal, and it's a good deal. It's 72.5 megawatts, of which I think 60 is the HPC element. You need to have ancillary power. So when they say 72.5, it means that's a total power. 60 megawatts will be used for HPC. Core Scientific are giving 500 megawatts to HPC, so they've got ancillary power, probably another 130 megawatts on top of that. So that'll be 650 megawatts for that contract. And growing again. So, you can't really compare these contracts in the same sentence. TeraWulf is $1 billion over their period. Core Scientific is 8.7 billion. It's different leagues, to be honest. It's like comparing Marathon Digital and DMG blockchain in terms of miner size. This is a start point. This year we'll hear more updates from TeraWulf. They'll be growing that, hoping to grow it, and they've got a lot of power at Lake Mariner site to do that. But at the moment, it's 72.5 megawatts, and that's where I see the benefit at the moment. But as Bryce said, if the Bitcoin price rallies to 150,000, Sam Tabar was quite clear. The conversation moves to Bitcoin mining at that point, because then you're making real profits. That the power cost of HPC is different from the power cost in Bitcoin mining. You can use more expensive power in HPC and not affect your margins as much. But with mining, every cent per kilowatt hour makes a massive difference. If you're mining profitably at 5 cents a kilowatt hour at the moment, and we said 5 cents was the average price, if it's getting to 8 cents, you ain't making money. Yes, Iron are making great money, but they're getting 3 cents and the most efficient fleet on the market. They're winning both ways, But the average, I looked at the average of the year, average is about 5.2 cents across all the mining companies. So, some are paying more than that because that's the average price. It's, and they're just about making money there. You can't really go to unless if you've got a fleet of S21s, you can probably go to 8 cents and still make money. But you've got 2 variables that you've got to manage. You've got to manage the power cost. You've got to manage the fleet efficiency, because that's going to drive your power cost. And so, miners are going to have to go and we talk about, increasing hash rate. They've got to increase the sites. They've got to buy more machines. Where's this capital going to come from? The banks aren't lending to Bitcoin miners like they are doing to HPC contracts. Core Scientific were able to raise, was it $500 million or 440 million convertible notes for fractions of a cent. miners were paying 17, 80%, 18% for loans a couple of years ago. And the banks haven't softened to that yet. They're not giving out, easy money for Bitcoin mining, but they are doing for HPC. That's why we've seen a big swing, because the money's available there. Every mining CEO we've talked to now, and we've done about, I think, 7 or 8 interviews in January already, Bryce, those that are looking at HPC have said, when we ask them about capital, because we're saying, you've talked a good story, now tell us how you're going to pay for that story. And they say, the markets are very susceptible to HPC. We'll get the money. We'll get the money for this, but they're not saying that with Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining, you're going to have to look at it in a different way to raise the funds for that. You're going to have to sell Bitcoin. You're going to have to use ATMs, get the shareholders to approve those. Although quite a few miners are circumventing that rule by issuing preference shares internally to vote on certain things that they can just push through. So there's a few miners out there that don't even need the shareholders' vote to raise an ATM now, which sort of like it takes away any control from shareholders at all then.
Well, and one point I wanted to make, Jarrett, just to bring it back to your question about the Stargate, I don't think we're going to see a big grandiose investment like that, for the simple reason Bitcoin and AI are fundamentally different. Bitcoin, there's a fixed daily cap, so it doesn't matter how many billions Trump invests in Bitcoin. The most he could possibly ever get out of it is 450 a day during the next 3.5 years. When you look at his strategic reserve to add 200,000 Bitcoin a year, it's not even feasible through mining. So I think on the Bitcoin front, the strategic reserve, if they allocate a bunch of money, it's going to be to purchase Bitcoin, because they can't physically mine it fast enough, regardless of the infrastructure investment. With AI, HPC, you can build infinite amounts of data centers, H100 clusters, Blackwells. The more money you put in, the more HPC AI compute power you have. It's not the same with Bitcoin.
Yeah. The Stargate thing was just interesting. And that's part of me feels that same way, that no matter, even if you put up, I don't know, however many megawatts, like you said, you can only get out so much, and you're in a global competition every 10 minutes.
Well, and you actually make it more difficult on your existing. You just told everyone, hey, I want Bitcoin mining in the US. If he goes out and doubles the global hash rate, he effectively takes 50% of their profits away. So I think it's a little contradictory to do the same approach.
That's something else that has been said many times. And going back to something, Bryce, you said as well, that you've heard multiple times, and I hadn't heard this, so thank you. This is why we podcast, right? To learn. You said that when Bitcoin price hits 130, that's where Bitcoin mining will be right on the cusp of being as financially attractive, I guess I want to say, as HPC AI. And I always go back and I use this example all the time because I thought it was a great article that Anthony released in July of 24, where he basically said, look, go into AI, go into HPC, that's great, but it's going to be interesting to see what those companies do that when Bitcoin hits 150, 175, 200. All of this was obviously hypothetical. It still is hypothetical today. This is not financial advice, but it is interesting to think, knowing that that's the threshold they're looking at. When it's 129, they're like, all right, we're still good. When it's 131, somebody in the boardroom is sweating, right? They're like, oh, I don't know now.
Well, and it makes sense. Like if you listen to Anthony, what he just said, or this last article, iron is arguably the best of the best right now. Most efficient fleet, best power costs. Their margins, as Anthony just said, 70, 80%. We know HPC AI is upwards of 90. So that kind of gives you a point of reference of how impactful that last 25,000 or whatever is up to 130.
Yeah, because one of the things that and we just did a mining metrics with Khan from Luxor, and one of the narratives that we've been looking at for the last couple of months on every one of those monthly episodes is that difficulty and hash rate are continuing to outpace Bitcoin price. And as long as that happens, hash price is going to be hanging around 60. And hanging around 60 with those other things increasing, with the difficulty increasing, it's kind of like, I don't know, the squeeze can be on. It may not be as comfortable for miners, but obviously we'll see. If the price rips, we'll see. If the price rips and people are also going to AI and HPC, so where the hash rate stays down, who knows? All to be seen. We're coming up on the hour here, and I want to make sure you guys get back because it's Friday, and I'm sure there's, even in the hour that we've recorded, I'm sure if we go on X, we're going to see something else that's going to, blow our minds here with some new development. To finish out, any the last thing we want to say as we, as you guys look ahead, you guys have kind of talked about some of the landmarks you're thinking about, but anything you want to kind of leave the listeners with, maybe about some of the PubCos, about some of the mining stocks, about the work that you guys are doing over at Power Mining Analysis?
I can go first. Mine's pretty quick. Not necessarily to PubCos, to Bitcoin, to crypto in general, but my message to you guys would be this. There's a lot of new interest in this market. There's a lot of people, this is their first cycle. It's very easy to get caught up in the bull run of this is going to go on forever, euphoria, it can't go down, we're going to hit 1 million, whatever the case is. I would just encourage everyone, regardless of what proxy or investment or stage of life you're at, just be aware this is a cyclical industry and take profits along the way. We've seen a lot of people that got burned really bad in the last cycle, and that obviously puts a very bad taste in people's mouth. We want Bitcoin to be around for the long term and help as many people succeed as possible. So that would be my message is just always remain grounded and understand this is a cyclical industry.
Anthony?
Yeah, just to go back to your point there before about when we talked about the growth in hash rate and Khan's actually raised a good point. Mining difficulty in 2024. So this is as more hash rate goes onto the market, you have therefore the time it takes to find the effective the number. It happens quicker than the 10 minutes. So every 2 weeks we've seen for most of those 26 times the difficulty change in 2024, it was changing being made more harder for the miners, and therefore when it's more harder, you're producing less Bitcoin. The difficulty impact for 2024 was effectively having like another halving for miners, and that's the way to look at it. And that won't stop. I think it'll slow. I think it's going to slow down in 2025 because I just think when you take a step back and look at the fact that difficulty is on the increase, hash rate has increased. I think it was 520 at the start of 2024. It finished closer to 800. So that went up, the best part of 50% in a year. And, your survey suggests that people think it's going to go another 50% in 2025. And I'm thinking, we had a lot of miners out there that were growing big amounts of hash rate. Are we going to see that same level again in 2025? Maybe not so. But the difficulty does keep everyone honest. And therefore, as much as we talk about the Bitcoin rate, when Sam made that comment there, bear in mind Sam Tabar has an asset light company at the moment. They've just started to buy facilities. When he made that comment, he was basically leasing facilities, leasing GPUs, and therefore his cost would have been a little bit higher. And he's saying 130,000 for him to change the strategy. And then again, would he change the strategy? The difference between HPC and Bitcoin mining, HPC is not cyclical. It's there. If the contract's Core Science have got a 12-year contract, they know on day one and 12 years time how much they're going to earn from that contract. It's written, it's laid in the contract. We all know because they put it out there for everyone to see. Bitcoin mining, as much as we'd like the price to go up, we don't know what the price is going to be in half an hour. Even since we've come on this podcast now, we've seen the market turn around and drop probably about 5% in the mining stocks just since we've been on the podcast, and that's only been 58 minutes. So, it's a challenging environment. You don't have that challenge in HPC. The contract tells you how much you're going to get paid, how much your costs are going to be, because Core Scientific have said, CoreWeave, go and sort your power cost out with the power company. That's your issue. We're not getting involved in that. We'll provide a facility. We'll provide the lights for you. We'll provide security and somewhere to put your GPUs. You buy the GPUs. You get your power sorted out, and that's your risk. And it's a great contract. Everyone wants that contract. Believe you me. And there might not be as many contracts that they've got. Not just a contract for 500 megawatts, but the fact that CoreWeave have given them hundreds of millions of dollars to build these facilities in advance. How many contracts do you get where the company coming in says, "Oh, there's a wheelbarrow full of money to go and do it, and pay us back in the first 2 years when the revenues come through, but we won't take all your revenues. Just pay back up to 50% each year for the first 2 years till you've paid it all back, and then after that, you're then free of debt. You're free of you're just rolling out profits for the next 10 years of the contract." it's a great deal. And so that's why I think the hash rate's going to hold back as a little bit in 2025 because of the HPC story. And bear in mind, it only came really through big time halfway through the year, and we haven't seen all the companies sign contracts yet. I think Rice is right. I think we'll see a lot more signing in 2025, and that might just tip people towards that. So where they're going to put their power towards HPC rather than Bitcoin mining. That's the way I think I'll end the conversation today.
Excellent. Well, I always enjoy having you guys on. If you guys had more time and weren't doing 62 podcasts a day, I would probably try to have you on more than once a quarter. Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to leave your website, which is excellent, the Power Mining Analysis website. I'll leave your YouTube. I'm going to leave both of your individual X accounts. I'm going to leave the X account for Power Mining Analysis, your LinkedIn's. Try to put as much information in the episode description so if people want to reach out, they can find you. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Listening on a podcast platform, please subscribe. Make sure you're following us at Compass Mining on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Anthony, Bryce, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Always a pleasure.